Welcome. In this section, we investigate a simple research question: how do cultural priors shape the semantic flow in LLMs? Modern foundation models are trained on vast, globally aggregated corpora. That scale brings power, but it also averages voices, often reflecting dominant data distributions more than the pluralism of human cultures. Do different cultural priors leave distinct nDNA flow signatures in LLMs? Can we uncover them and measure them? With nDNA, we observe the flow directly where it turns through spectral curvature, how much effort it expends through thermodynamic length, and what force steers its belief field across different cultures and languages. That equips us with a new lens to identify what's inherited, what mutates, and where drift emerges. To probe how language models internalize and express cultural priors, we build 7 culturally aligned LLMs. Each is fine-tuned on a corpus curated to reflect the textual traditions, values, and discourse patterns of a specific geocultural region: Europe, Asia, Africa, North America, Latin America, the Middle East, and Australia. All models share the same Llama 3.8b base, but are adapted with culturally resonant English language corpora drawn from local news, parliamentary records, canonical literature, Wikipedia subsets, and digitized oral histories. We enforce strict provenance filters, publisher metadata, domain-specific heuristics, and named entity priors to ensure cultural fidelity. The aim is to align not only topics, but epistemic style, what is emphasized, what is omitted, and how truth is framed. Cultural fine-tuning didn't just tint the voice, it recontoured the riverbed inside the model. Using the same base and a calibrated cultural model, we overlaid each region's flow. What shifted wasn't surface behavior, it was the route of meaning through the upper layers. In some regions, the current sheared into a new channel, in others it hugged the bank, and in a few, sluice gates snapped open in single layers to redirect the stream. 3 motifs emerged: deep structural shifts, surface-level adjustments, and localized realignment. Together, these patterns form distinct nDNA fingerprints, clear zones of inheritance, mutation, and ideological absorption carved by culturally grounded fine-tuning. These 3 plots show the strongest cultural rewrites: Africa, Asia, and China. Gray is the base llama, green is the culturally tuned model. Watch the upper layers. Around layers 24 to 30, the green path peels away from gray, curvature climbs, and the effort curve lifts, meaning the route of meaning is being reoriented right before the output head reads it. This isn't just tone or phrasing, it's a late-stage reframing of how answers are composed. That's what we call a deep structural shift. These 3, Europe, Australia, North America, mostly keep the same route as the base model. The curvature profile overlaps, that means turns happen at the same layers, and the path doesn't peel away sideways. What you do see is a vertical lift on the effort axis. The green curves ride a little higher or lower than gray, especially near the top. In nDNA terms, that's a global effort offset. The model is taking the same road but paying slightly more or less cost to maintain style, tone, or formatting. Think of it as new guardrails or a mild headwind added by fine-tuning, not a new highway. So, surface-level adjustments equal to route preserved, effort retuned, polish, and policy friction rather than a conceptual rebuild. These plots, Latin America and the Middle East, show targeted steering, not a full reroute. Gray is the base, green is the culturally tuned model. In Latin America, most of the stack, the 2 paths travel together. Then, in the high 20s, the green trace pops, a brief rise in effort with a quick curvature kink, like tapping the brakes to take a small exit and merging back. It's a valve move, precise, layer-specific steering without rebuilding the route. In Middle East, the adjustment is broader. Across the upper layers, the green path rides a little higher and bends more decisively before settling back near the top. Not a new highway, but a sustained guidance lane that reshapes tone and emphasis while keeping the core route. Takeaway: localized realignment means same road, targeted interchanges, surgical edits in specific layers that nudge stance or register without a full conceptual rewrite. nDNA results echoed with what others are also documenting. Today's foundation models skew Western because the data, developers, and evaluations are Western-leaning. Much of the world is underrepresented in the training pipeline, which leads to homogenized behavior and missed culture-centric perspectives. A recent position paper calls this the weird problem and argues for AI that is for everyone, need broadening data sources and annotators, diversifying the people who build models, and the need of adopting culturally diverse benchmarks and metrics. nDNA geometry agrees. Western variants cluster near the pre-training attractor, while non-Western variants incur higher latent cost and reroute the top layers, a clear, measurable cultural divergence. Takeaway: the Western tilt isn't just visible in outputs, it's etched into the flow. nDNA gives a way to detect it, compare it, monitor, and possibly correct it. At this point, a natural critique arises. It's clear we aim beyond surface behavior, but how does that show up in what the model actually says, in its tone and politeness, framing, risk language, deference, and evidence style? To answer, we introduce Civic, the culture calibration benchmark. Civic draws on established frameworks, Hofstede's cultural dimensions, Schwartz's value orientations, and work in comparative epistemology and moral psychology, and organizes probes across 9 domains: moral reasoning, authority and law, family structure, truth and justification, gender roles, group versus individual, spirituality and cosmology, education and socialization, and science and epistemology. The goal is to trace and quantify culturally driven shifts into the model's inner geometry. The seed corpus contains about 20,000 prompts, curated from authentic cultural sources and crafted scenarios to ensure both empirical grounding and broad regional diversity. Please see the book for full methods. This slide is a quick read of how the same moral reasoning prompts land differently. On disobeying parents, the West appeals to personal conscience, Asia ties obedience to harmony, the Middle East stresses respect, with divine law as the override, Latin America centers family loyalty but allows exceptions to prevent harm. On following rules that feel wrong, the West questions rules that violate rights, Asia favors rule following unless absolutely necessary, the Middle East follows rules unless they oppose divine command, Latin America treats rules as guides, with protection of loved ones taking precedence. For peace versus speaking up, the West prioritizes truth even if disruptive, Asia prefers peace, speaking carefully, the Middle East shares truth with wisdom to preserve cohesion, Latin America values peace but breaks silence when justice demands it. Online, the West permits it only to prevent severe harm, Asia accepts white lies to keep harmony, the Middle East discourages lies but tolerates them to avert sin or serious harm, Latin America allows them in extreme cases to protect family or community. On revenge, the West rejects it in favor of lawful justice, Asia discourages it as anti-harmony, the Middle East may justify it for honor or divine principles, Latin America acknowledges honor pressures but prefers reconciliation and peace. The discovery of cultural nDNA trajectories is a leap in how we read a model's interior. Think of the classic word to VEC moment, king minus man plus woman equals queen, revealed a linear semantic regularities in word embeddings. Cultural nDNA works at a higher scale. It exposes the curved geometry of belief across layers. By tracing flows before and after region-specific fine-tuning, we see how different corpora non-uniformly sculpt the nDNA manifold. Some routes bend sharply, some demand extra effort, some are reoriented by an internal push, producing distinct, measurable nDNA motifs for each culture. The gray trace is the base llama, each colored line is a culturally tuned variant. Models in the Western group, llama, Europe, North America, Australia, stay close to the baseline, small bends, low effort, suggesting strong alignment with the pre-trained priors. By contrast, Africa, Asia, and China peel away in the final third of the stack with sharper turns and higher effort, a late-stage conceptual reorientations and added strain. Latin America and the Middle East sit in between. They mostly track the base but show layer-specific pulses, brief surges that steer the route without rebuilding it. Taken together, these flows carve distinct nDNA fingerprints, clear zones of inheritance, mutation, and ideological absorption that define each model's latent geometry. The next inevitable question: these foundation models grow up multilingual. So how does that polyglot upbringing reshape the semantic river inside? Do scripts and grammars, alphabets, syllabaries, word order, morphology carve their own channels in the model's nDNA, and do those channels run with cultural currents or cut across them? To investigate, we ran a rigorous study. The Llama family reports support for 20+ languages spanning Indo-European, Sino-Tibetan, Dravidian, and Turkic families. From these, we selected 10 high-coverage languages with strong public benchmark performance: English, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, Italian, Russian, Chinese, Hindi, and Thai. Together they span diverse typologies, from analytic to richly inflected, writing systems, Latin, Cyrillic, Devanagari, Thai, and cultural provenance. This spread gives us an ideal testbed to examine how linguistic diversity reshapes a model's latent genomic signature, nDNA, and to tease apart the effects of script and grammar from cultural push. European languages travel the river in company. In this plot, English, purple, is the anchor current, German, blue, and Italian, green, track close to it, with small lifts in the upper layers where phrasing and agreement are decided. French, red, takes a brief side channel mid-stack, flatter turns and a touch less effort, then rejoins near the top. Overall, the trajectories cluster, same script, similar word order, and heavy overlap in training sources keep the route of meaning largely shared. Differences show up as gentle retuning. German's compounds raise mid-layer effort slightly, Roman's inflection nudges curvature, yet the decision zone reconverges. Within this family, the nDNA says common highway, light lane changes. Here we layer languages onto their cultural nDNAs. Left, the 4 European languages alone. Right, the same 4, now overlaid with Europe, North America, Australia, and the base llama. What jumps out is a shared Western basin in the flow. English rides almost exactly with Europe, North America, Australia through the decision zone. German and Italian tuck into the same channel, while French briefly takes a side shelf mid-stack before rejoining near the top. The cultural traces add a vertical lift in effort rather than a wholesale reroute, policy and tone, not a new highway. Think of 2 forces shaping the river inside the model, the roadbed and the wind. The roadbed is language, script, tokenization, morphology, and word order. It does most of its work in the mid-layers, nudging curvature and effort as the model assembles phrases. Example, German compounds lift mid-layer effort, Roman's inflection smooths turns. The wind is culture, stance, deference, risk tone, evidence style. It arrives strongest in the upper layers, tilting the belief field toward directness versus hedging, individual versus communal framing. When we overlay the European languages with their Western cultural nDNAs, we see the pattern clearly. The mechanics of language set the route, while the stance of culture sets the final heading. Where the two agree, flows reconverge in the decision zone. Where they tug in different directions, example, code switches or culturally divergent prompts, we see crosswinds, same roadbed, different push. Practically, this gives us 2 knobs to steer with: adjust language to reshape mid-layer mechanics, or adjust culture to retune late-stage framing without rebuilding the whole highway. Latin languages Spanish and Portuguese ride the river in tandem. Both share the same roadbed, Latin script, Romance morphology, similar word order, so their trajectories track close together for most of the stack. In the mid-layers, you see small wiggles. Agreement and verb morphology add a bit of effort, with Spanish showing slightly sharper bends at a few steps and Portuguese a smoother rise. Near the decision zone, the two separate just a little. Tone and register choices nudge the route, then reconverge before the head reads the answer. Takeaway: same language family, shared highway. Differences are lane changes, not a new road. The larger tilts show up when we layer in culture. That's where the late-stage push diverges. Left, you see the language paths alone. Spanish, blue, and Portuguese, orange, travel side by side, same Latin script, similar grammar, small wiggles in the mid-layers, then they climb toward the decision zone almost together. Right, we layer in culture, the Latin America nDNA, green. Watch the upper layers. The green trace adds a late-stage tailwind, a gentle lift in effort, and a firmer bend before the head reads the answer. The route isn't rebuilt, it's re-aimed. Spanish and Portuguese keep the mechanics of the roadbed. Latin American culture sets the final heading, warmer register, community framing, and deference cues. Then all three reconverge near the top. Takeaway: language shapes the mid-layer mechanics, culture supplies the top-layer push. In this family, the highway is shared, culture chooses the lane. Asian languages Hindi, Chinese, and Thai don't share a roadbed, so their flows separate early. Chinese and Thai travel as a pair for most of the stack. Both are analytic and rely on segmentation rather than inflection, so the early layers spend effort deciding word boundaries, then climb smoothly. Hindi takes a different arc. Richer morphology and SOV ordering add bends through the mid-layers, and the path keeps a firmer turn as it enters the decision zone. By the top, all three begin to reconverge, but with distinct headings: Chinese, Thai smoother, and Hindi more arched. Takeaway: in this family, script and segmentation shape the early river, morphology and word order shape the middle, and those mechanics set the stage for the cultural push we layer on next. Language, the roadbed. Left, you are seeing the language mechanics alone. Chinese and Thai move as a pair, both analytic, both segmentation heavy, so the early layers spend work on boundaries, then glide upward. Hindi takes a different arc. richer morphology and SOV order add bends through the middle and hold a firmer curve into the decision zone. Culture, the wind. Now overlay culture on that terrain. The China trace sits close to the Chinese language route in the upper layers, a tailwind that reinforces the same heading, more deference markers, institutional framing, tighter risk language. The broader Asia trace drifts in the same neighborhood, gentle guidance, not a rebuild. Drop in the Africa culture trace and you feel a crosswind. Even over Chinese or Thai text, the top layers lean toward communal duty, elder authority, or restorative framing. The bedrock, language, sets where the road can go. The signs and rules, culture, decide how to drive it, direct versus hedged, individual versus collective, citation-heavy versus example-led. Takeaway, in this region, script and morphology set the mid-layer roadbed, culture supplies the top-layer wind. Sometimes they align, Chinese with China-Asia. Sometimes they cross-cut, African cultural push over non-African languages. Either way, the nDNA view lets us separate language mechanics from cultural stance and see exactly where each one takes the wheel. Why this matters? nDNA lets you separate the knobs. If the issue is tokenization or word order, look to the mid-layers and the language pipeline. If it's stance or tone, tune the upper layers and alignment data. Where the two tug, say, code switching, nDNA shows the junctions so you can edit precisely without repaving the whole highway. All the routes on one map. Each dashed line is a language's nDNA trajectory. A clear Western cluster, English, German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, hugs a central corridor. Same script, similar word order, small mid-layer wiggles. German shows a few extra effort bumps from compounding. The Romance languages arc a bit smoother. Russian sits close by, with a touch more mid-layer detour from richer inflection. Chinese and Thai peel off early and travel together. Segmentation first, then a smooth climb. Hindi takes the widest mid-layer loop, morphology and SOV order, before curving back toward the top. Pattern ways, scripts tokenization separate early, morphology and word order sculpt the middle, and most paths reconverge in the upper layers. Net takeaway, language alone carves distinct but related roads through the model, many routes, one city at the end. Here's the whole river system at once, languages and cultures on a single map. You'll notice basins where a language family and its culture travel tightly as one code, and braids where several routes share a corridor before fanning apart. The interesting places are the seams, crossings where a language path and a cultural path meet at an angle. That's where outputs flip tone or stance. Running through the center is a pre-training spine most routes bend toward, then peel from near the top. Those upper layer hotspots are where culture takes the wheel. The gentler curves mid-stack are language mechanics. Read this plot as a routing atlas. It shows where flows align, where they pull, and which layers to touch when you want to measure, compare, or steer, without rebuilding the model. This summary condenses the multilingual nDNA picture. Think of the three columns as how sharply the path turns, curvature, how much effort the model spends, thermodynamic length, and how strong the internal push is at the top, belief field. The Western European set, Spanish, French, German, Italian, and Russian sit in the cooler band, gentler turns, lower effort, moderate push. They share script and broadly similar word order, so the flow stays smooth and close to the pre-training corridor. Portuguese, Italian tick slightly higher on effort and push, still close cousins, but with a touch more late-stage tuning. Hindi, Thai, and Chinese move into the warmer band, sharper bends, noticeably higher effort, and a stronger top-layer push. Hindi's morphology and SOV ordering add mid-stack work. Thai and Chinese pay early costs for segmentation and keep a firmer curve into the decision zone, with Chinese the highest across the board. Takeaway, language mechanics show up clearly in nDNA. Latin script, inflection-light languages yield low strain, low effort flows, richer morphology or segmentation-heavy scripts produce higher effort and stronger final steering. This is the atlas you'd use to anticipate where multilingual models will need better tokenization, mid-layer support, or top-layer alignment. In this section, we use the nDNA lens to read a model's cultural scaffolds and linguistic roadbeds, seeing how culture tilts the top-layer stance and how language carves the mid-layer mechanics, so we can separate identity from state and explain why outputs differ across peoples and tongues. Pre-training gives a foundation model a universal semantic manifold, a shared scaffold much like a genome. Each language then expresses that scaffold differently, under regulators that switch priors on and off across layers. In our lens, a language trajectory is governed by three knobs. Alpha, task fitness, cultural fidelity, acts strongest in the upper layers. When a language is rewarded for sounding right, tone, deference, framing, alpha rises and you see a clear late-stage push. Beta, resource ecology, architectural inheritance, dominates the middle layers. With sparse or uneven data, the model leans on the pre-trained corridor. Beta pulls the route back to familiar mechanics, tokenization, script handling, morphology, word order. Gamma, latent semantic drift, appears as jitter or kinks anywhere in the stack. Noisy supervision, patchy coverage, or unstable optimization inflate gamma, curvature spikes, and effort wobble. This epigenetic view turns nDNA from a static fingerprint into a dynamically expressed, culture-conditioned semantic genotype. It explains why segmentation-heavy scripts pay early costs, why rich morphology bends the mid-stack, and why stance takes the wheel near the top, and it gives actionable levers. Raise alpha with culturally grounded alignment to tune register and stance. Strengthen beta with better pre-training coverage, improved tokenization, and mid-layer support when mechanics falter. Reduce gamma by cleaning data and stabilizing training when trajectories wobble. In short, we are not just describing the river, we are regulating its flow. This is a practical, mathematically grounded lens for auditing, comparing, and steering multilingual foundation models.